Thank you so much, Dileep and Susheem, for delivering such an engaging presentation. From Microsoft to Walmart, all the use cases truly showcase how Gen AI has made its way into supply chain. To dive deeper into the theme of technological innovation in supply chain, let us begin our panel discussion. Please welcome with a big round of applause, Mr. Sanjeev Kumar Singh. Mr. Singh is currently the Chief Operating Officer at Ather Energy and oversees manufacturing, program management, and central planning for the company. He's a seasoned professional in Lean Six Sigma, manufacturing transformation, team leadership, with over 20 years of experience in driving operational excellence across industries like automotive, telecommunication, and business process management. Sir, we are delighted to have you here. Please welcome, with a round of applause, our next panelist, Mr. Ranjan Sharma. Mr. Sharma is working with Bestseller as Chief Innovation Officer and Head of Supply Chain. He is an expert in IT infrastructure, supply chain strategy, enterprise resource planning, with a strong background in leading large-scale initiatives across retail and consumer goods, including SAP implementation, warehouse automation, and strategic IT development. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. Keeping the same level of energy, please give a big round of applause for our third panelist, Mr. Jaydeep Joshi. Mr. Joshi is currently Director, Supply Chain at Cummins. With over 23 years of experience across supply chain operations, analytics, continuous improvement, and IT consulting. He is currently the end-to-end leader for integrated supply chain management and deployment of quality management systems for Cummins Global Service and Analytics. Thank you so much, sir, for gracing us with your presence. And finally, give a huge round of applause for our next panelist, who is also the moderator for this conclave, Mr. Vinod Mathur. Mr. Mathur is currently the Vice President, Product Management at Yonder. He specializes in guiding companies through transformative journeys, from strategy management to achieving tangible business outcomes. With expertise in strategic consulting, product management, and project leadership, he has led transformative projects across industries like electronics, semiconductors, and chemicals. Welcome everyone here, and thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. Let us begin the panel discussion. Sir, the stage is all yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and great to see all of you here. Hopefully, the panel, our esteemed panelists who are here along with me, will be able to add some value into this topic on technological innovations in supply chain. As you can see, everybody comes from a very different background, from retail to automotive or manufacturing, automotive component manufacturers, and I come from a technology provider for supply chains, right, as Blue Yonder. So hopefully with a diverse background and a diverse perspective on this topic, we should be able to give you more insights into what's happening in this field, how technology is shaping the supply chain of the future. So what we will do is we'll go around. I have some questions for the panelists, and let's hear them out. We'll start off with the importance of technology itself in supply chain, although that's a no-brainer. I mean, all of us know today we cannot really differentiate that supply chain innovation or a transformation you cannot differentiate that from a technological innovation, right? You cannot think of transforming your supply chain without doing something on the tech side. And over the years, if you look at last 40, 50 years, every decade, there has been some innovation or some transformation in the field of supply chain. And at the same time, the underlying tech has also continued to support and evolve. Right from, say, an MRP, which started off many years, 4 or 5 decades back, that kind of got automated through software, which was able to do large-scale MRP. Right, as we moved then into, say, demand planning or supply planning. Even today, we use Excel, as Bhudeep also mentioned. But if you really have to see how supply chains have really transformed or really improved on their demand planning process, you'll see that underneath there has been a technology which has supported that. If you look at supply chain optimization or scheduling optimization or logistics optimization, everything, it has taken that process to the next level through the support of technology. We now had a decade back integrated business planning, right, where not only supply chain but finance got involved in supply chain. This decade has been more technology also becoming a stakeholder in this whole process with data science, machine learning, AI, all that coming in. So as the supply chain maturity evolves, we can see the underlying technology continuing to support and helping it evolve, right? So maybe we'll start with Ranjan, coming from a retail, which all of us can easily relate to, right? As all of us are consumers in our own sense. So how, if you could share some insights into how you have used, how your organization has used technology to improve your supply chain performance, at the same time store availability of different products and all of it, right?
Thanks. I think when you talk about availability, it's today is from a retail perspective. If I talk of, or as a brand organization, if I talk of, it's no more about just store availability. We are talking of e-commerce. We are talking of quick commerce. We are talking of speed, agility that Bhudeep talked about, and today's customers' expectation, no matter what it is, they started with FMCG in 10 minutes. The expectation is today they should be able to get fashion in 10 minutes. How much of it is possible, not possible is a later question, but that's the expectation that you have to solve for. Today we are all trying to solve from a consumer's problem or a consumer's ask, not from what the organization can deliver, and we have to shape up to be able to deliver to the consumer expectation because we are delivering experience. And when we started with this, what we have to do is we have to and as Bestseller, I'll tell you, Bestseller, we are a house of brands. We operate about 6 brands in the country. Been in the country for a little more than about 15 years. We started putting all of this process way back into our design process itself, because when we are designing, that's the time when we have started thinking in terms of when that product should be launched. So we always have a defined store launch date when we design the product, and then we start working backwards from there. And then the whole of the demand planning, the whole of the sourcing process actually gets built into the whole process of the supply chain in terms of ensuring how we will make that product available at that point of time, whichever date there is a store launch date, which means that it's not just a store launch date, it needs to at least be available from a product shoot, because e-commerce doesn't happen without being able to create the right content, the right catalog, the right imagery for the product to be available on e-commerce, right? And we have to launch that product nationally in the country. Imagine we run through 2 distribution centers, one in Bhiwandi, which is out on the outskirts of Mumbai, one in North, which is Gurgaon. And we have stores and a supply chain extending right up to the northeast from and Kanyakumari to Jammu, which means that the product has to be planned in a way so that it reaches all of these store points at 250 odd store points that we have, and 1650 odd shopping shops that we have, plus the partner distribution centers in case we have wherever we are running that same product into a different business model where it needs to be stocked into a marketplace distribution center. That's the launch date, and that's where we start working from. So multiple technologies, maybe not one technology per se, but also being able to embed that entire value chain in terms of being able to ensure from an allocation plan from the demand planning itself, and then being able to take that down to be able to ensure that the logistic systems are embedded into it so that everything is becoming responsive and you have minimal manual interventions. I agree, Excel is a big challenger to all of this. We always keep getting challenged and through Excels, but then the objective is to ensure that people on these tech platforms, whichever tech platforms we are using, right from a planning perspective, right from a design perspective, or even and mind you, the supply chain itself is shrinking. Gone are the days where where fashion used to be predicted about 9 to 10 months or 12 months ahead. Today, we deliver fashion from a concept to a shop floor in about 40-45 days on an average. That's where we have been able to, and especially in the last 4 years, this entire journey has started shrinking massively. I can tell you in 2019, we used to still plan for about 95% of a pre-season planning used to happen almost 9 to 10 months ahead. And our ordering for 95% used to happen that way. Today, we only do about 50% pre-ordering, pre-season plan. 50% is left for in-season. Our entire OTB has open to buy. It has become completely dynamic. We look at it on a weekly basis. We have plans and we don't drop, unlike a lot of core fashion players, we don't drop once in a season and then maybe another drop in the season. We drop every week, which means that there has to be a new product which is getting launched into a store every week, which means that there has to be freshness at all points of time. Because we've seen a customer walks into a store almost every 45 days. And every time he comes in, he needs to see a few new options available in the store. So which means that much more pressure onto the entire supply chain in terms of the accuracy, in terms of being able to bring in that responsiveness, that agility to be able to source. And our sourcing is a global sourcing. We don't manufacture everything in India, though we manufacture almost 50% of it in India. The rest comes from many other countries. So which means that you have to start planning. And that's the reason why we are still not being able to take it below 50% on a pre-season ordering. We are still pushing for it. But I think store availability, or it's not just about the store availability of the product across the entire value chain, multiple techs, right from a demand planning tech to a logistic tech to a supply warehousing tech, to maybe a store operations tech as well. All of this is getting involved. The OMS itself is getting engaged into it. The whole of the product information management system, all of that has to come together to be able to ensure that all of this falls in place.
Thanks, Ranjan, for those insights. Moving on to Jaydeep, on the completely other end of the spectrum, if I have to use that word, you're making components or engines for a lot of automotive products that we end up using. Right? So you're not directly facing the end consumer, but how are you leveraging tech in your supply chain to better maybe plan, collaborate with your OEMs and get more insights into the market that you are serving?
Sure. So other end of the spectrum is absolutely the right thing to say. So I work with Cummins. We are a diesel engine manufacturer. All that has been said on sustainability, we'll talk about that another day because that's not the topic today. But yeah, I mean, I do want everybody to have this destination zero, which is what our mantra is in terms of making sure that we are zero emission by a certain time in the future, right? So that's another thing. But for us, the least count of planning and launch is not days, not weeks. It's months. I hope that at whatever, I mean, a decade later, I would probably say that it has gone much faster. But that's the world that we live in, right? Because an engine, which is essentially what you see, I mean, all the big trucks that you see here, or the gensets that, I mean, people know Cummins by the green gensets, the Jackson, the Powericas, or the Tata Motors, and even whoever has been outside of India, all those big 18-wheelers, right? I mean, that's what we power. It's a 100-year-old plus organization. So I think, Bhudeep, a lot of what you mentioned on that global organization with whatever 50,000 plus people, it might even be like 2,000 applications at our end. I don't know, but kind of tying all that back together and coming back into the question that Vinod asked. So how are we leveraging? So I think one of the key things is definitely going back to the basics in terms of realizing that what we have, whatever, even when we have 1,000 plus applications, maybe there are these very big fundamental applications, the ERP systems, and even not just ERP, but the CRM, the SRM. They are old. And when I say old, they are still what our planners use, our sales representatives use. We are currently really investing in technology to either enhance or replace some of those, right? Because that's the need of the hour. we are probably already a bit late in that entire curve, but that's where we are really focusing on. And while we are doing that, and that's kind of even within Cummins, one end of the spectrum on technological advancement is looking at what we need to change, modify, or completely get new on big enterprise solutions using the experts in the solution provider space, in the consultants. So what are Accenture, Blue Yonder, SAPs of the world? The other end of the spectrum is really then I would say using all the new technology that has come in, and it's more into data analytics. How do we empower? How do we harness that simple things, even of MSBI Power Platform or so, Power BI, right? It's one of the new things on the block. Well, no longer new, but really then give it back to employees so that they can. I mean, we don't need to depend on these months and years of cycles of replacement and enhancement. But this is where, on the other hand, really empower the people, let them learn and build their own small point solutions or descriptive diagnostics, or descriptive or diagnostic dashboards. But what we have seen is both those things are working, right? I mean, on the one hand, we are always like, we cannot wait, and hence we work on Excel for all of these new features to come in. But then at the same time, improving the data quality, data hygiene, and really building some insight. So I think two different ends of how I would look at it in terms of not just for Cummins, but I think a lot of the organizations. And the other end is really collaboration. Even when we say ERP or advanced planning, right? Using collaboration tools such as the supplier management tools, supplier collaboration. One of the things that we recently did here in India, which is not even done outside of India for Cummins, is the transportation management system, right? I mean, if you look at it, TMS is a backbone of, just like, you mentioned, Ranjan, I think we have like some 200 plus dealers all over the country, spread all the way farthest corner of, the country, northeast, where it takes easily 2 weeks for the product to leave from maybe a warehouse in Pune to go there. But not having that visibility ourselves of what happens after our product leaves. And I'm not talking about just the engine, but all those spare parts that are required to keep the engines running, right? So in the aftermarket world. So one, tapping into the visibility of how that entire journey is happening, but also exposing that to our dealer network and customers to say, this is where it is at any given point of time. And then tapping into that to say, okay, now that we understand it, which is the first step, right? How can you then use all the data to optimize it further? And there are some good things that we can probably talk about in terms of how it has helped. But you look at it in any form of a CRM tool, TMS, or a transportation management tool, and then really look at what you can get out of it. There is a lot. So even if it's a very traditional, I won't say very traditional organization, but it's an organization with very different kinds of products, and we have our own goals in terms of destination zero. Using what is available now in a way that we can actually harness that technology is, I think, where we are probably taking some baby steps.
Thanks, Jaydeep. Coming to Sanjeev, right? Electric vehicles, especially the products that you are in, is a very unique product where there is so much of tech that is embedded into a traditional mechanical product, right? Like a scooter or a vehicle. So has this kind of helped you do some things differently, some things better that were not possible with traditional automotive supply chains? If you could share some views on that.
Thank you so much. And thank you to SPJ for inviting us for a discussion on a very interesting topic. And all the young friends here who are sitting since morning to listen. I'll probably take a minute to talk about Ather. I'm not sure how many of you know. So it's a company founded by two IIT Chennai graduates in 2013, Tarun Mehta and Swapnil Jain. While we manufacture two-wheeler electric scooters. The name says Ather Energy, doesn't say Ather Motors. Or the reason is the company started to look at it from the perspective of energy, right? So energy has three stages: generation, transmission, and consumption. And if you make an impact on any of these three areas, especially on consumption, if you're able to bring in efficiency, that's something which can be a game changer. And we all know, from basic science or engineering background, that energy is something which is always there. You can't, it doesn't go away, right? So it's only form which changes. And if you're able to tap into that energy, you can do a lot of good to the planet, right? So if you compare, I know I worked with Bosch for about 10 years, and I was talking to Jaydeep. They were also one of our customers. But we all know, for example, the efficiency of let's say an ICE engine versus an efficiency of an electric vehicle. The difference is about 10 to 15% efficiency to 90+% efficiency, right? Which means, and there are a lot of studies, right, which talk about how electrification is going to help. Also, cradle to cradle, as Bhudeep mentioned, right? Purely because of the way it saves energy losses. If you take everything aside, right? And as you mentioned, Rajiv, these are technocrats who started building a product not keeping scooter in mind. So it's not that the first product they had in mind was to build scooter. They started from energy. The first thing is, how can we make an impact on consumption side of energy? And they started to work on, let's say, battery packs, to say, hey, how do we make good battery packs which give, kind of power to whatever needs to move, right? Transportation, as Bhudeep also mentioned, approximately 30% of total GHG emission comes from that side, right? So how do you make an impact there? And that's where the start of, let's say, battery pack, and then you uses, and again you come to mobility, which is the biggest use which comes there, right? Ather scooter, which was launched in 2018, was the first truly connected two-wheeler in the world. That gave a lot of advantage. The biggest advantage, if you look at, I'm sure all of you would have heard of digital twin in a way, right? So I'll talk about an example on how we use digital twin in a very, very different way, and how having a connected product gives a huge advantage to us, right? So if you look at digital twin, wherever you study or you see in the companies, you look at digital twin either from a factory perspective to say, can I visualize end-to-end factory process? Where is my inventory stock? How are my machines performing, right? Or you look at digital twin from the perspective of seeing how your product is performing, right? And most of the, let's say, most of the products which are not hardware in nature is where you look at performance on the product side. If it's an app, you're able to see how it's performing, how the users are using, what is the utilization rate, what is the stickiness, and all the stuff, right? Or else, if you're a pure R&D company, you, let's say, go to NVIDIA, you start looking at how is the R&D yielding results or not yielding results, right? In terms of using the technology and data in a digital twin way. What we have been able to do, because the product was completely truly connected, is to build a digital twin which is end-to-end. So what we do, for example, is if we are developing a new feature and we're testing that on the R&D side, we're able to see the impact of that on production lines, on whether it's going to reduce my cycle time, reduce my efficiencies, what's going to be the impact on tier 1 side, to say, in terms of manufacturing processes, and also see what is the impact it will have on the product. And once that is manufactured and is there in the market, we are able to trace it back to say, hey, this batch of changes we made in a particular hardware, how is the vehicle actually performing? And since we collect real-time data almost every 3 milliseconds from the vehicle, we're able to also see whether the changes that we made on the production shop floor or in a particular hardware, firmware, software on the vehicle in R&D, how is it actually performing in the field? And I'll give you one example of how that's actually transforming how we do business. So if you look at battery health, is one of the most important parameters for success of electric vehicles, right? And the biggest worry that consumers have today is, hey, battery pack, if you know, constitutes about 30% of the total vehicle cost, right? Probably in line with what an engine costs in a traditional car or two-wheeler. The biggest problem consumers have today is, hey, if the battery lasts only 5 years, right, you're asking me practically to buy another 30% odd thing in the vehicle, right? How is it reliable? The cost will eventually go up after 5 years replace, right? So initially, when we did a lot of R&D on a battery pack, we said, hey, 5 years is when your battery will start deteriorating. For automotive uses, you at least want 85% health of the battery to remain to give you power. Since we're continuously monitoring the performance of all the vehicles, including the battery packs, every single battery pack gets monitored, right? With its health, for its performance, for the way it's heating, the way the cooling is working fine or not. We saw that, hey, in 5 years, the degradation is only from 100% to 97%. That use of technology gave us an immediate boost, and next day we were able to announce to the market, hey, the battery warranty is extended from 5 years to 7 years. Because we're very confident with the data that we see, the data that we collect, that the batteries will not derate even to 85% in 7 years. Today, when the products have already done 7 years, we're seeing a very good trend that even in 7 years, they've not gone below 90%. Probably that will give us another, and how it's helping business, it's not that you do all of that, let's say, free. So when I announce from 7 years to 10 years, probably it's an extended battery warranty that you'll offer. Consumers are happy because they're not going to spend 25,000. Companies happy because they'll get 3,000, 4,000 odd rupees in terms of extended battery warranty. So the entire uses of technology from end to end. So it's not about digital twin in a way, only looking at it in a very, very silos manner. That's giving us a capability to look at digital twin from end to end and thereby provide user experience which was never seen before, right? The second example I'll choose, I think we spoke a lot about sustainability, right? Electric vehicles, fundamentally talking about how it will also help the carbon neutrality or net zero goal for the planet. It's very important that we also see, are we sustainable in our own operations, right? So while from a consumer side, moving towards electrification helps in sustainability, our own operations also need to, and when I say operations, and I look at supply chain, as Bhudeep also mentioned, it's not, let's say, start from, and it's not about transportation, right? It's not about only sourcing material or delivering material. It's about right from design. And I think Ranjan also mentioned that, right from design concept till delivery, and then the entire circularity of it, right? What we're able to do, again, one area where you're using technology, it's very important that you use sustainable material when you sustainable material, sustainable process. I'll give you 2 examples, right? If you're using a material which is very, very heavy on energy for let's say, for bringing that material into the shape that you want, right? Or if you're using a plastic grade, for example, which doesn't decompose and completely, then probably while you are saving, some carbon footprint by making electric vehicles, you're eventually not doing a lot of good to the planet, right? So what we have been able to do, and we have onboarded a platform which gives us a very clear, kind of transparent picture on what material has what kind of carbon footprint right at the beginning, right? It's not about once you have the vehicle, you start the life cycle assessment and you come to know about the life cycle of each of these products and the kind of carbon footprint they have. But right at design stage, how you're able to, let's say, design for sustainability. It's not about once you have designed, you start looking at it and start looking at it in ways of reducing your carbon footprint, but how do you take some of those in picture while you're already designing? And how we do, there is a very fundamental difference in the way we use that tech as well. Unlike traditional organizations where teams work in very, very silos. So design teams work only with designers, right? They have a mandate from product teams what they need to build, but then designers, engineers work on their own. Many times, and that's something I've also experienced in the past, they're not even aware of the supply chain complexities that come in, right? They're not even aware of the sustainability of the material and the process, which is mostly your supply chain manufacturing folks will know. So the way we have structured the organization right at design stage, it's always a cross-functional team. So it's not one designer who designs a product, right? So you have a mechanical designer, you have an electrical, you have an electronics guy, you also have a supply chain guy, you also have a manufacturing engineer, you also have a production guy. So these teams coming together is what helps us in a lot right at the design stage to know, are we choosing the right material? Are we choosing the right process? Are we choosing the supply chain, which is sustainable over a period of time? And when I say sustainable, not only from net zero carbon neutrality sustainability, but also its ability to deliver. Am I choosing a material and a process which is not sustainable in long term because some changes will happen in the process which will make it redundant, right? So, and there are 3 examples that I choose to say how we're using technology in our organization.
Thanks, thanks, Sanjeev. So, as we were talking about different technology components and uh, like what Bhudeep also mentioned earlier, that there are a lot of innovations, a lot of new tech components which keep coming every year, every few months. There is something new that is out there. So one of the interesting charts which I at least refer to is like going back to Gartner, who is one of the leading analysts. Right? They also published this chart called a hype cycle. So if you look at different technology components in each industry, each domain, they plot it on a hype cycle. Fundamentally, it shows that every new technology goes through a peak. I mean, immediately people start thinking this is the next nirvana, everything, it will solve everything that we are facing, right? It reaches a peak of inflated expectations and then kind of falls down. People realize that, yeah, it is good, okay, but not really that great. I mean, it can do some things, but cannot really do other things. And then is when actually we start realizing the best use of that particular technology component or that innovation. And then it kind of plateaus and people really find the best utilization of that tech, right? So interestingly, I mean, I did see the presentation on Gen AI. The Gartner's hype cycle at least places Gen AI right on the top right now, on the peak of inflated expectation. So people are still trying to figure out. I think it will take some time till we understand what's really the best use of that in our practical day-to-day life. Right? So continuing on that track, Jaydeep, if you could throw some lights on even in the automotive sector, right? I mean, there are a lot of things like Sanjeev also mentioned around getting data out of the components themselves, like telematics and all of that. How successful some of these components have been, and have they really helped in the way of preventive maintenance or making sure that your parts are positioned where you are sensing that, okay, there is going to be a higher failure rates and all of that?
Sure. So telematics, I think everybody who drives a car probably today, right, knows how suddenly we get signals from our cars or even otherwise. I mean, it could even be a washing machine probably, right? I mean, if not a car, definitely everybody knows how a washing machine works maybe. But essentially, I mean, just like any other organization, Cummins started, I mean, for once, while it's a mechanical product, as we say, it's an engine, right? It's no longer just a mechanical product because it's really moved from being a mechanical, which still has moving components, of course, valves and pistons and fuel pumps. It's the brain is now the electronics, right? So it's very much an electronic product. But even besides the brain, there are a lot of sensors now which go on a product. So for a big complex product like a diesel engine, there are many sensors, right? So the last few years has been really just collecting data and trying to make meaning out of it. Now, of course, I mean, while we are getting that information, we are trying to process that information in terms of really seeing where the problems could occur. So from being, I mean, in the recent past, I would say we have been able to successfully move from just getting a lot of insights for diagnostics into why something failed into what I would now call as prognostics, which is where, and again, that's probably where the real advanced analytics or ML AI come into picture. I mean, if I look at it, that's one of the best use cases that we have seen where we have been able to tap and build something which is actually now going to predict. So using the telematics data, building these prognostic models, we have been able to come to a point where the early warning failures of certain components, I mean, there are like 1,000+ components that go inside an engine, even many more, and something as simple as an oil seal, if we are, and an oil seals come in like a few rupees, I mean, literally, I mean, so a few rupees of an oil seal going wrong can actually put the entire engine down and something is hence down, a generator is down which is running the entire hospital, or a fire truck is down just because something like that failed, right? And I'm not over exaggerating. Of course, I mean, while I say oil seal, typically the investment on this is on this technology is used to see the big 5C components like the crankshaft, the camshaft, and but anyway, I mean, so we have been able to develop some good models to predict or give that early warning sign from where we usually all, and even what we do today is, so this is all after in service, right? In aftermarket. Before in service, there are already good statistical models which tell us that, what could be the life. I think just drawing some analogy further, what is the usable life, and, hence what should you really expect in terms of early failures. So that helps us, that has helped us to a limited extent in planning our under warranty, I would say, parts. But I think where the new kind of what I would expect again, and I've worked in aftermarket for over a decade now, is to say, when will I be really able to use this data which is giving us from a product quality or for product or predictive maintenance, how would I be able to really connect that back to now the planning of the spare parts, right? I mean, where should be, how much in the first place are we going to need in terms of what kind of those, I mean, which of those 1,000 components, are going to really be required in that early phase. And why I say early phases, because this is still too early. I think over time, even outside of warranty, we would hopefully be able to use a lot of this data. But so while we have been able to kind of in a limited way be successful on getting the early warning signs and build that, of course, into improving the product, but also predicting failures. I think the next thing that I would expect is how we as an organization are actually able to use this entire data into planning demand for the aftermarket, and hence then position inventory, because again, demand in a very big way across the whole world, whatever, some, many thousand customers and fleet owners across the entire world. Where do we really need to position that inventory and at what point of time, right? So I think that's still that's still a long distance, but I think that's probably the first step in terms of where we have been able to reach.
Thanks, Jaydeep. Ranjan, coming on the retail side, I mean, we have at Blue Yonder, we have implemented machine learning based forecasting for many retailers and probabilistic forecasting, a lot of these things using internal organizational data, like what promotions you have run and what the price point is and all of it. But I know at the retail store, you also have access to a lot of consumer data. So how do you draw this balance between data privacy and accessing consumer specific data? At the same time, as an organization, you want to improve your supply chain performance, make sure your customers are getting a good portfolio of products and then the availability and all the things that you spoke about. So it also needs access to a lot of data for you to be able to do that. But at the same time, there are privacy concerns and all that. So have you been able to draw a balance out there, or challenges? If you could share something on that front.
So I think, the good thing is DPDP is yet to come in. We are lucky. We still have some time to go. But the Indian consumer, if you look at today, if you are able to incentivize the Indian consumer, they are ready to share the data. On one side, where it is a boon for marketeers and retailers. On the other side, consumers are not even realizing what they're sharing there on the platforms or different places that they are going, and what could be the implications of that data. But as global retailers, we have our responsibilities and our accountabilities to be able to ensure how we leverage that data. Where a consumer walks into the store, at the entry point itself, we start collecting data in terms of who has walked in. We are able to go down to a level where we are able to identify the age groups, the consumer groups that they are walking in, the gender ratios, and all of that. We are now trying to toy with the idea of what kind of a fashion are they wearing so that we are able to predict the kind of assortment that we have in that store. While we do all of this, we have to anonymize the data. We do not store any data to that individual person. That's a very, very clear mandate from our perspective. So that we are able to at any point of time reach out to that customer if at all that customer only allows us to reach out to them, only then we are supposed to reach out to that customer in whichever way and form. So today the biggest problem which could have acted as a boon for us when a consumer walks into a store to be able to identify, and then the consumer has not just left traces in the store when he's walked in. He has gone multiple places. He's gone onto social media. He's gone onto our website. He's gone onto our social commerce, to Google, and multiple places he has actually left traces. We could have collected all of that data and been able to personalize, hyper-personalize, hyper-recommend that consumer, that customer. But all of this is still limited to the extent of the customer being able to identify himself at the store. Though there are technologies available to be able to identify that customer, still we would not want to go there because someday or the other this DPDP is anyway going to come in. And we being a global organization, we cannot take that risk anyway because GDPR has been there for ages in Europe, and we are compliant to that. But I think where it has started helping is even in spite of being able to anonymize this data, the Indian consumer is leaving a lot of traces, a lot of information about himself, which we are being able to leverage in terms of what kind of assortments we have at which place, what kind of a demand at, and imagine, I just heard today 121 languages we talk in India, the kind of festivals that we celebrate in India, the kind of demand that keeps generating on one side, and imagine the colors could be very different. What the color and the size that will work maybe in Kerala will not work in Punjab. The checks that the consumer in Punjab is going to ask a customer in Tamil Nadu is never going to go for it. How do you understand what do you need to manufacture? What do you need to place where and how and at what point of time? That is where a lot of this data is helping us to be able to understand the right placement of our inventory in terms of, see, we don't run only 2 distribution centers. We have almost about 2,300 odd stocking points where we store inventory. And the purpose of storing that inventory is to sell to the end consumer. And if it doesn't move quickly, our product, we are almost kind of in a perishable product. 6 weeks down the line, if the product has not sold, it is going to go on discount. That means it's a loss for us. We have to sell it. And there are 2 ways how we look at our management reporting or as a P&L. One is if it doesn't goes in 6 weeks, if it doesn't sells, we have to discount one. The second is after 4 weeks, we start from a P&L perspective, from a valuation perspective, we start taking a write-off on that product. So we have a very, very strong mechanisms because our fundamental says in a fast fashion space, if a product has not sold for 4 weeks, which means that it is not going to sell at the price at which you have actually planned for, which means you're going to sell it at a discount. So start provisioning for that discount. And that's the biggest loss that we incur into our P&L, which means we have to leverage that data, that consumer data, to be able to ensure that the right placement is done so that we are able to deliver faster. One is even on an e-commerce perspective, if you look at the biggest order cancellation happens in the first 6 hours. What if you've been able to ship it in the first 2 hours itself? You will be able to avoid that cancellation, order cancellation. You'll be able to reduce that return from a consumer. The RTOs are that we normally call return to origin. That's close to about, for fashion, it's close to about 8 to 12%. The overall return is about 40%. Even if you are able to reduce that by 1 basis point, that's a huge, huge money that we have saved. Because one is that much of inventory is stuck into the chain, which is unproductive. At the same time, you are going to incur cost in terms of getting that back, refinishing it and making it available again for selling, which means you're going to keep adding cost onto that same product and further discounting it as well to the consumer. So I think The consumer data today from either we collect it from a point of sale or from our different systems that wherever we are engagement systems like our service solutions that we have, our bots that we collect from on WhatsApp, on e-commerce, wherever we collect, all of that data actually comes back to us in a CDP. And that's where we are able to harness in terms of being able to when to reach out to the consumer, in which medium to use to reach out to the consumer, when to nudge a customer. Imagine a customer has actually gone to Google, discovered your product, gone to your website, seen the product, gone to your WhatsApp commerce bot and added that to the cart but have not bought. When do you nudge that customer to buy that? What's the right time and which medium? Do you use WhatsApp to be able to nudge that customer to be to entice him to buy or give him an additional 10% discount to buy that? And what is the best price you offer him to be able to buy that? All of that is being governed by how you are reaching to the consumer, how you are engaging with the consumer, what product you are recommending to him, and which medium you are actually pushing that customer to. Not necessarily always pushing him to an e-commerce is the best way. Pushing him to a store is always going to be the biggest profitable channel for you, because when a customer walks into a store, if you look at Gartner trend, Gartner predicts that the consumer is anyway going to spend at least about 4 to 5% extra when he walks into a store, because he's not just going to buy that product. You will have an opportunity to be able to cross-sell and upsell that customer. That is where you would want to, and that's the biggest asset that we have. The stores are the biggest investment, and that's the biggest experience center. No matter what we do on our e-commerce, no matter how much tech we deploy on e-commerce, we will never be able to match the experience that we can deliver in a store because of the kind of infrastructure that we do and the kind of experiences that we create through the product, the placement of the product, the lighting, the whole experience of trial. You will never be able to beat that in a digital platform. So I think that's where a lot of this consumer data is being used. But I think a lot of learning process, a lot of evolution is happening in this space in terms of how and when. This is a never-ending process. We are learning every day, and every day is a new day for us.
Thanks. Then coming to Sanjeev, you mentioned around using of technology for sustainability as well as for the digital twin that you mentioned. Right? So how has your experience been in terms of using some of these technology components to create like a digital twin? I'm sure there would have been iterations or challenges that the first sensor that you might have used may not have worked, right? I mean, so if you could just share something on the journey of not just the success part of it on what you are able to do now, but what kind of experiments had to be done to be able to get a good view of getting a digital twin or using it to improve sustainability and all those things.
Sure. I think putting any system or any breakthrough improvement in an organization is a learning process, right? And we have had our own share of failures while deploying that, but that's how you learn. So if I have to talk about experiments that we did in the process of putting a fully integrated digital twin, right, from product to product, which is like customer and customer behavior, to the manufacturing setups, to the supply side. If you look at one point of time, our vehicle had probably 80 odd sensors, which was collecting data. What we realized is, and what we're realizing today, and the amount of data that we collect, it's in terabytes almost every hour. And initially, while there is a lot of euphoria and collect whatever you can, right? What we realize is that the cost of collecting and storing and processing the data is just too huge. How do you identify and find a way to say what is the most meaningful data that you want to collect? How do you ensure? And if you look at the uses of the data, right? The cost of hardware today, in terms of the whole chain of acquiring the data, to storing the data, to processing the data, to getting meaningful insights from, and that putting into action. The cost of hardware is the smallest now, right? So the sensors hardly cost a few rupees, right? but the storage cost and the processing costs a lot. What we are thinking today and where we are heading towards is how do we look at the best use of the data we are collecting. And the way we are looking at the uses of data is, I mean, normally you use data in 3 different ways, right? What is the real-time use of data? So if I'm collecting, just to give you an example, right? So I'm collecting a data from a scooter about the temperature of the battery pack or the temperature of the motor, for example, right? Am I able to real-time give an indication to the customer to say, hey, you need to probably slow down because your vehicle is overheating, or even directly reduce the power output? And that's something which we do, right? So the moment we see the overheating of a motor or overheating of a battery pack, the software automatically starts to derate the vehicle performance, which means even if you throttle hard, you will not get but it does it very slowly, so it doesn't affect your safety, it doesn't affect your experience of that vehicle. So the real-time usage of the data is something that we do not want to tweak with, even though even if it costs a lot. The second use is how are you using the data to kind of develop even better products tomorrow, and that's where you use the data to fine-tune certain features of the vehicle, introduce certain new features of the vehicle, and that's where we are strongly looking right now to say, hey, all of this data, terabytes and terabytes of data, how much of insights? So if you're only collecting 2 insights, which is helping us introduce 2 features, the success that we will have with those 2 features in terms of additional sales we will generate probably will be only a fraction of percentage of the cost that we are bearing today, right? And that's what we're looking to optimize. So I think the journey of understanding what actually helps and how do you strike the balance of how much to collect and how much to deploy is the biggest learning that we are having right now. The second piece of learning is, I think Bhudeep also touched on that. While we talk about the integrated digital twin, the individual applications or individual platforms that needs to be used, for example, you can't use the same platform of data collection that we used in manufacturing, for example, which is more of a manufacturing execution system at your product development stage. You will definitely use something else. The kind of software and the firmware and the entire architecture that we run on a vehicle is completely different, because there you can't even afford a microsecond of lag because it affects user safety. So you have to work with different platforms. How do you ensure that you're able to integrate? And that's where we had initial challenges to say, how do we integrate a vehicle platform to a manufacturing platform to a R&D platform and to a sourcing platform, for example. Is another challenge that we faced, where I think it took us a few years before we were able to now harmonize the basic architecture. So platforms you cannot change. I think it is also spoken that every platform will have its own inherent benefits in that particular domain and space, which you don't want to lose and you want to leverage on. How do you fix the architecture of each of these platforms in a way? Because again, building an API layer to talk to all of them and drive something out of it, which will make life complex. So how do you look at the inherent architecture of each of these platforms and try to harmonize to the extent possible so that you can leverage through APIs in the way you want to drive a digital twin is something which is very important. So I think there are 2 learnings. One is how do you find the balance of how much you need, and the second is how do you work on the fundamental architecture of every technology that you are deploying to ensure that you are able to cross leverage and look at the entire chain of events.
Thanks, Sanjeev. Coming to the softer aspect of any technology adoption, right? Because we talked about the actual technology part of it, and being from a tech provider space and being in consulting for so many years, not every project is successful. Right? I mean, we can have what we call as technical go lives, that the system is in place, the solution is up and running, but at the end of the day, nobody is using it. Right? I mean, that happens many times, and there could be reasons around data, there could be issues around change management, adoption, which we have at least tried to address proactively. But if you could just quickly, maybe 2 minutes each, I mean, Jaydeep, if you could share any of your projects where, what kind of steps did you take to improve the adoption of any transformation that you were trying to bring in the supply chain? Because it's important to know about the tech and what benefit it brings in, but that's at a vision. at the end of the day, it has to be adopted by the actual users on the ground. So if you could just quickly share some views on that.
Sure. So I think while everything is going on and people are at the core, right? And one of the things that impacts people is, of course, any change in a new application that comes in a software. And I'll probably just take a bit of a tangent through all the advanced planning and fantastic technologies that we have, and just touch upon automation. I mean, 5 years ago, I didn't know what RPA or robotic process automation was, and then we were told that go implement RPA, right? And that's one of the. For me, it was an interesting change management, learning, and being part of that, right? Because one of the things that it was like, yeah, we have bought this license, let's start making the most of it. And when we went in, we really discovered that there is so much that exists that can be automated, but it's so difficult to automate because, one, of course, data, and two, of course, business rules, because right now a lot of things which are kind of whatever tribal knowledge or based on a certain planner skill or some other person's skill has to be automated. So I think for me it has been really a great discovery in terms of how important it is to really go from this is all. You can do a lot to really be able to prioritize what exactly that you want to, let's say, automate in this case. And through that process, how do you really take the people alongside? The first question that anybody has is, what is going to happen for my job, right? And the whole narrative around, while we want to automate, that doesn't necessarily mean that, your job goes away, but we are really, really empowering you to do something more value added and not just do those mundane steps of getting an order and then punching that order and then probably moving inventory from one place to the other place, right? So I think that's one of the important ones that I feel, everybody needs to look at. It can also be a big failure mode if you don't do it right, because if you don't do it right, one, you have really not really understood what can be automated, and let's say it starts giving you like a garbage in, garbage out, right? Based on the limited business rules, and the art of the possible is always that automation may be able to take you to 80% and not the 100%. So you might unnecessarily be striving for that 100% perfection, which is not necessary. And two is, if the people don't adopt that that change, then that means that you're always going to have your team is not essentially going to trust you, and then you very soon realize that it's just not going to work, and then you have to come back, right? So how do you take that entire journey is one of the learnings for me.
Thanks, Ranjan. From your in your supply chain, it's so geographically spread out. Your team members are actually in different states, different parts of the country, and being a multinational organization at the same time. So if you could share your views on how you were able to drive successful adoption of or some anecdote or something around how difficult it was, or what steps do you normally take to improve the adoption of any transformation you are bringing in?
So I think I'll go back to your earlier question. I'll address that because that's very close to my heart as well. What is the most difficult technology to implement as a CIO, as a CTO? And given I've been in retail for almost about 24 years. This is my 24th year I've completed. I think the most difficult technology to implement in retail is a planning solution. Getting people to adopt and move out of Excel and figure out a way to work through a planning solution, the end-to-end spectrum of a planning solution, that's the most difficult thing to ask for. In my career so far, in my previous organization, I tried implementing 2 of them. Both of them failed. In this organization, we started with a planning transformation in 2019. We went very ambitious. We failed in 2020 miserably. We restarted that in 2021. Till date, 5 years into the implementation, we've still not been able to achieve what we desired and what we started with. I think the change management process from a perspective, from a user's expectation perspective, getting them to believe that this system is going to change or deliver what they are looking out for, helping them to understand that this is not going to take away the power that they have. Because their biggest fear is the transparency that this brings in. The biggest fear is the amount of data that they have to feed into this. Excel in a silo, sitting in a silo is so easy to manage. Every day you are able to show a different version. Whereas in this system, maybe the moment a demand planner puts in his data, it is going to shake up something which a merchandise planner is going to do. The moment a merchandise planner is going to do something, the buyer is going to get impacted straight away. And they are going to start shouting. So I think this has been one of the toughest implementation I have ever seen in my career so far. But I think it's any implementation for that matter, if you pick up, the biggest mantra is how do you take people along? How do you bring the key stakeholders, identify champions within your business to be able to champion that product? I'll give you a classic case. When we started our AI journey in 2018, we did not go into supply chain or any, which was a very, very clear use case where we could have got a lot of benefit. We said we'll pick up the toughest one, which is the design side, the product design. And we got one of a brand design head to be able to be part of that journey. Imagine a brand designer, fashion designer. They're the last ones who want to look at data. They said this is going to take away my entire autonomy because they work on guts. They look on trends. They look on WGSN. They'll go to Milan. They'll go to different markets, look at products, look at different trends, spot that, and then take inspiration from it and then do designing, right? The moment you start giving them a tool, a solution which goes back and tells them, hey, this product that you've designed is only going to sell so much of it. This is the possible sell through that you can actually get out of it. And he says, nonsense, you guys don't even understand. You don't even have the data to be able to predict whether this is because this is a new trend. You've never had the data to be able to predict this. How do you challenge that? I think creating those champions, we picked up one of the brand design head as part of the project, went through that entire journey. This was a very, very interesting use case where we picked up. And one of the thing that we did was, and it was my CEO and me, we were traveling to IBM Research, Fashion Research Lab, which is based out of Bangalore. We were just going there, and on the way we thought of why is only as a brand which was doing so well last season it has not done well. How could we find answers to that? Same products, similar stuff, same stores, same processes, everything is the same. Why has it suddenly gone down? And that's when we started getting into technology to be able to identify why a red top, two similar looking red tops, why one sells well and why the other doesn't sell well. And that is where we found technology playing a role in this. And that's where we realize that if you don't bring these guys into the project, if you make it a technology product, it is going to fail. You have to make it a business project. You have to, because at the end of the day, they always keep asking you the question, what is in it for me? How is it going to help me? How is it going to ease my life? How is it going to solve for me? How is it going to make me more efficient or deliver more from that same resources or whatever I have, being able to deliver more? And I think that's the problem that we've solved. I think with that, what we've done is we've brought any project that we do, we've started bringing people, core people, creating champions, and we've used these champions to go and tell a story. It is all about a storytelling. To make any project a success, it's all about the story you weave around that project. The stories, the nicer stories that you get people, the business users to go and talk, not the technology guys. Technology guys will always go and talk good about it. It's all about the business guys to go and talk about those good stories is what makes it happen. And that's what we've learned over the years, because that's the only success mantra that I've realized is going to work.
Thanks. And Sanjeev, from your perspective, you could also share a couple of thoughts on this.
So in some ways I echo what they mentioned, but also slight difference of opinion I have on this topic. So I mean, if you look at it eventually, I mean, and if you look at it also from the perspective of how consumers adopt a new technology or a new product, everything nice around that is fine, but unless it makes economic sense, vehicles. So you can talk about why people are not enough people are not buying electric vehicles, why they were not buying enough electric vehicles earlier, why more and more people are buying today. All fine, we all care about Mother Nature, everything fine, but is it a dent in my pocket or it's a saving in my pocket? The moment technology is able to show the value, adoption will improve. Either for end consumers or for organizations or for people working in an organization. So if you are bringing in a technological change, if it is going to add more value to what I am doing, I'll adopt. If it is not, I will not. So you take a demand planning tool as he spoke about. If it's not going to, and it's about a balance, right? And how much effort I have to put in. And again, I think while it's very easy to blame people, to say, hey, people do not understand that it's important. I mean, if you go back to human psychology, we are all change averse by nature, right? So our reptile brain is like millions and millions of years old, and the habits do not change so easily. That's how humans are. So to simply say, hey, why are you guys not understanding, not listening, not adapting to change, is not going to work, because that balance that change will only happen if the balance in favor of what the benefits are far outweigh the efforts that are being put in. If you're able to find those technological changes or technologies which is going to help either an end consumer or an employee of the company who has to support in adopting to that technology, first we should be choosing the right technology which actually benefits far outweigh the efforts. And the second, as Ranjan mentioned, we should be able to show that actually it's going to benefit you a lot. And I think the third element I would add there, any technology adoption today, people look at it from an efficiency angle, right? How is it going to bring efficiency to the organization? And my experience there is, the moment we keep a very narrow view of efficiency, I mean, it's not about, hey, today I have 10 people to do the job and to implement a demand planner and I only need 5. And globally, probably it's a headcount reduction of 100. The moment you take that narrow view of efficiency, it's not going to work. So how do you find a wider view of efficiency? If you look at the same thing, a per demand planner, my revenue is X. With this technology, per demand planner, my revenue is going to be 1.5X. You will find people motivated to do that. So I think choose the right technology, where benefits far outweigh the effort that is being put in. Explain the why and how it's going to help every individual as well in the way. And third is to look at the wider implications of efficiency in how it's going to help organization grow, because with that people also grow, rather than taking a very narrow view of efficiency to say, hey, and that's where the threat of jobs being at stake comes into picture.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's all of us, as you said, would want to know what's in it for me. How will it help me do my job better, or how will things change for me? And as an organization, what's the value? I mean, what am I going to really get out of that? So that definitely becomes more important, very important. So as for the audience, I mean, as you can see, technology in supply chain definitely has a lot of promise. It can do a lot of wonders, a lot of innovation happening in. At the same time, it's not like everything is as smooth, right? You come up with a new solution and yes, you can just go and implement and everybody will adopt it. So there are definitely challenges. So it's a very, I would say, a dynamic field where new things continue to come up. And there is a lot of focus that is there in this. Even after having spent more than 25 years personally, I still see there are so many new innovations. Every year, every decade, there is something new in supply chain. So it's a very exciting field, lots to learn. You could be, and for the last question, which I will ask the panelists is around for the students here, right, on your behalf, that if you want to pursue a career in supply chain, what should you be focusing on, or what are the kind of skills that would be relevant, right? So I at least start personally before I ask them. I mean, my views are there are different areas in which you can get involved in supply chain. One, as a user, as a planner, or as an end user of supply chain, or as a practitioner that we call them. Or you could be in consulting, like Bhudeep mentioned. I've also spent a lot of time in supply chain consulting, right? Or supply chain implementations, where you are implementing technology solutions for supply chains. You could also be part of the product development itself, or the technology development. right? Where you are creating, for example, the sensors or advanced planning systems or collaboration platforms, and you are kind of providing the tech to different businesses to leverage that. So there are multiple types of roles that exist within supply chain. It needs definitely a very good understanding of operations research concepts. I mean, it's fundamentally rooted in OR, and now gradually we have AI, machine learning, all those technologies coming in. But those fundamentals need to be there on basics of supply chain, on what exactly makes it work. I normally compare supply chain as the backbone of a business. So it's really, it can make it, break it, it can make it run, sprint, marathons, whatever you want to do. It's really the lifeline in a business, which can transform the way you are really operating the business itself, and bring that competitive edge for your business over your peers in the industry. So I'll just ask a quick word of advice to our panel, from our panelists to the students, on if we are looking to build a career in supply chain, what do you think the students need to focus on, or what kind of skills are really relevant that they should really focus on building? So let's start.
Sure. So, I mean, fundamentally, first understand some element of the supply chain and be part of that, right? Don't just go and I very early on went and worked for I2 or Blue Yonder before really working as a planner, for instance, right? I mean, I only had 2 years of experience, but then the next 6 years, I realized that I was so far out because I had the best of the solution to implement without really understanding the business from the other side, right? So and then over the last 13 years, I've actually then moved into the business side. So I always find it valuable to have that combination. Maybe initially still get that experience, and then as you move to really use technology and harness that technology, I think again, and as people who come out of MBA schools and colleges, you're eventually going to manage a portfolio of work, lead people. So really use that right decision making in terms of where I need to use the technology rather than what technology to use. Because I think that's the most, that's probably the biggest differentiator, to prioritize, to really understand what works or what is the need of the hour. And of course, we all spoke about the human aspect of it, right? So change management, not just for adopting new technology, but also just even fundamentally otherwise as supply chain professionals, right? I mean, it's a very people heavy organization. I mean, it's a very people heavy function still. But also, how do you really take people through that entire journey, right? I think those are some thoughts that I would want to leave with.
I think Vinod, you actually spoke about whatever is available or whatever can be done in supply chain. But from my perspective, what is the skills that you need to succeed in supply chain is more about perseverance and getting over the fear of failure, because every day you have to keep trying something new. Every day is a new day. There is a new challenge which will come up to you. Every day you have to think or look at the same problem from a different lens, and maybe you'll find a different answer. That's the important aspect only to be able to succeed, because the same problem which existed a few years back had a different answer earlier, but today the same problem has a different answer, and tomorrow it might again have a very different answer. It is all going to be dependent upon the need of the hour, the situation, and the capability or opportunities that you have at hand. A lot of that is going to change that same dynamic. So it's all about being open, and it's as rightly said, it's a people oriented, being able to work with different kinds of people, different mindsets of people together. That's the key to success in supply chain.
So if you look, for me, supply chain is, and I think I also spoke about it's an end-to-end, right? So you include also core operations which happen at factories, either at supplier factories or your own factories play a very important role. There are many areas, many career opportunities to speak about. Supply chain analytics is coming in a big way, right? So if you look at, there is no organization which is not focusing a lot on supply chain analytics. Digital transformation of supply chain, whether you talk about your manufacturing execution systems or you talk about sustainability. I'm sure you'll be hearing about a lot of new startups coming who are focusing on scope 1, 2, 3, net zero, carbon emission, a lot of those topics end to end to understand how an organization is working and can work on. So I think from an opportunity standpoint, especially when India is looking to move towards a $5 trillion economy over the next few years, it cannot happen without manufacturing and supply chain outgrowing other industries in India, right? Which means the number of opportunities will improve. Number of fields will increase. However, the most fundamental thing, which for me is which is very important, is you have to get your hands dirty, right? So and for me, if I look at a very strong sourcing guy, has to have worked in a factory in operation somewhere. Otherwise, you won't know the nuances of how you are developing the component, how you are negotiating with vendors. While a Gen AI can help you throw your last quote, to understand the pulse of where is my supplier putting those €5 extra or $5 extra, which is not genuine. It'll only come if you have worked on the shop floor to know that, right? So I think whichever field you choose to pursue your career in, two things, in my opinion: get your hands dirty. There is no alternate to that. There is really no alternate to that. No AI ML can bring that into your mind. And the second, I think, as Jaydeep mentioned, I think it's such a huge domain. You can't say I worked on sourcing side and I'll build my career entirely on sourcing side. If you want to grow as a leader in any side, eventually leading organizations, you have to ensure to keep taking efforts to keep moving between different verticals, functions, jobs. Every time you start in a new function, start dirtying your hands and then grow. That's my piece.
Thanks for those insights. Do we have time for Q&A or? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so hopefully we have at least tried to address a lot of questions. But if there are any specific questions from the audience, I think I'd see 2 hands, 3 hands. Yeah.
Hello all, good afternoon. Premchand here. First of all, thanks for the great insights. So my question is to Ranjan sir. Sir, recently we had the opportunity to visit the Bhiwandi DC. Also, really it was a great experience and having the state-of-the-art facilities. So my question is basically, while you mentioned about your demand sensing and demand shaping for after the 4+ weeks of the product launch. So how different it is for the B2B segment to B2C segment to get the POS data and sense the demand and rectify and save the demand as per that. Thank you.
So I think thank you so much for visiting our Yonder DC. This is one of the most coveted facility that we've ever built. One of the biggest investment, and it's still 4 years back we started that, and it still does wonders for us. But I think 4 weeks of data that you're talking about, we from an e-commerce perspective, we get data every milliseconds, and from a B2B businesses, we get every day and we get data. That's the way how we are able to, and from our stores, we are able to get data back every 2 minutes, which means we have kind of a near real-time data from our stores and the channels that we directly retail, and from a B2B channel, get that data every end of day. Every night, every evening, we get all the sales data that is happening across a different value chains, across all our stores in the country. So yes, maybe there might be some lag, but then everything needs to be done at a very, very real-time basis for any kind of a predictive or capability that you need. A day-old data is also very good enough.
We have a few more hands.
Sir, I have one question. That actually, when implementing even the simplest of technology in core technical industries, we see there is a problem with change management. People refrain from using such kind of technologies, newer technologies. So how to handle change management in that case?
Maybe I'll take a stab, and I think we spoke about change management enough, and it's a topic that will never. I don't think anybody really knows. Maybe we need more psychologists in the organization more than HR professionals. But I think we probably touched upon it, right? It's the story that you build and the narrative that is very important. And forget about technology adoption, right? It could be about our own personal. So I think if you're able to really relate that to yourself, that's one. And take off all the technology adoption into saying, what is it, how do I deal with change, or how do I find it difficult to deal with change in my personal life? And it could be about absolutely anything, right? I mean, it could even be about keeping your car home and using the metro. We are all talking about it today before the discussion. How would I, as a regular commuter to work, make that decision? What are those things that I don't want to do, I don't like, but then somebody tells me something, or one experience, of course, but two is also I probably rely on a lot of things that people are saying around me, right? And that's something for an organization. The organization has to probably, or the leadership really has to drive a very clear message. And believe me, it's not going to be a very easy thing to just come out and you have a narrative, you have a few slides on the presentation, you make a talk, and then people are just going to adopt, right? So also be ready to change your change strategy on the fly. And if you don't do that, then you're probably taking the crowd too far away from before you realize, right? So just some of my thoughts here.
I'll probably tell a small story there was a restaurant which was a Michelin star restaurant, and they wanted to go green, right? Sustainable. The CEO had an idea, everything green, right? We go to a green restaurant, probably will attract more customers. People are getting really, crazy about sustainability. Very soon, a project manager or technical project manager assigned, budgets assigned, timelines given, 3 months, make our all Michelin star restaurants green. What a technical project manager does, I have to replace this gas oven with an electric oven. Accordingly, I have to have all the utensils, everything, right? Project running on time. On the day when the restaurant is supposed to switch over, the chef says, sorry, the taste only comes when I cook on the gas oven, not on this electric. The guy was not consulted when the whole project was being planned and executed, because you gave the project like a technical project of changing from a gas oven to a sustainable oven, and thereby promoting. I think the most fundamental thing as far as change is concerned, please ensure that the users are consulted on time, before time if possible. And there is always a huge sponsorship of why. So if no one explains the chef, why do we have to go green, and what is the benefit that is going to get, there is always going to be resistance. So there is no running away from the hard work of consulting people, taking people along. And I agree, Jaydeep mentioned, in my opinion, and if they are interested, please go through and read. There is an organization called ProSci. There is a change management method they recommend, which is ADKAR. You will find enough stories and methods on how to run change. And the fundamental difference they talk about is any big project cannot run only with technical project managers. The role of a sponsor and the role of a change manager is very, very fundamental to that. And the last piece on that, don't initiate a change where you're not confident the benefit will far outweigh the efforts being put in that. There's no running away from that as well. You can't say, my CEO has said, my VP has said this change has to be done. I have seen somewhere else it has benefited, hence no. Please evaluate whether it's also going to benefit for your own organization.
I think I'll add to that. Sorry, I'm taking more time, but this is from my experience in one of my past organizations. So I used to work for Future Group prior to Bestseller. And at Future Group, we used to have we had Devdutt Patnaik as a chief belief officer. You know what? What did he tell us? And what was his role as a chief belief officer? He said the resistance to change is at the belief level. You have to attack there. How do you link it back to the whole belief system that people have? And he used to actually map it back to mythology. His way of bringing in a change management was through mythology. And that's where people, because mythology is all ingrained into us, right? We all understand that. And if we are taught about it, or we are told about a change with mythology, that was his way. Nothing right or wrong. So there are different ways of bringing in a change management. Every organization has its own ways of bringing in a change management. But I agree to that. That's the biggest mantra for success of any project.
Thanks for all those insights. We have time only for one more question, I'm told.
So my question is with Sanjeev sir and Jaydeep sir. So today the technology is very rapidly changing, especially in the automobiles. We see that the hardware what we are having right now on our vehicles, as soon as the software get revised, it becomes outdated. The life cycle of it is rapidly reducing, especially in engines and powertrains. So what value the customers can see after 3, 4, 5 years if their product is getting outdated? So how can we convince the consumer, and what kind of impact it will put in their minds?
So suddenly I felt old when you said sir. If you look at, actually it's the phenomena which is happening right now is exact opposite of what you mentioned. In fact, software enabled products are increasing the lifespan of the hardware that we have. You know, I'll give you an example, right? So if you look at, we introduced a new feature called auto hold on our vehicles, which basically is when you are in a traffic and there is a slope, right? You leave your brake, the vehicle will not move back. On a traditional vehicle, to implement such a feature, you would need 10 years because you have to modify the entire powertrain for it, right? In case of an electric vehicle, very simple. The hardware is same. You start running the current in the opposite direction. Motor starts to give the slight drive in the opposite direction. Now, using the power of software, you are able to bring a new feature in the vehicle, right? So today, in fact, if you look at, and that's where the smartness of the product managers and the product manufacturing companies come into picture. And how do you at least envisage at least next 5-10 years to say, hey, what potential changes might happen? And for that, we knew that this is something which is a big pain. We did not want to implement. The only thing we had is we had a one small gyroscope already inbuilt into the PCBA of the motor controller, right? Which basically enables us to bring. So I think it's if you're able to think a little ahead to say what potentially value you want to bring to the customer. And because of electronics is much easier. You put one diode, one thermistor, one resistor, and you can use that to bring the power of software to drive bigger value and increase the lifespan rather than reducing the lifespan of the vehicles.
Yeah, actually, a very interesting. I had taken an Uber once in Dallas. It was a Tesla for some reason. So I was chatting with the driver. He in fact echoed the same thing, that one of the best things he was talking about the EV was that every few months or a year when he gets the software upgrade, it completely feels like a new vehicle. So it is not just like you mentioned, it's the whole software upgrade itself changes the whole.
In fact, it's increasing the customer experience like never before. So I mean, almost every 2 to 3 months we do OTA. I mean, over the air updates for every vehicle, and the kind of features suddenly. So I'll give one more example, right? So we say something called fall safe for the vehicles, right? So if you look at the biggest, I'm not sure if you guys are aware, the maximum number of injuries in an accident for two-wheeler happens after the real accident has taken place. So what happens? The vehicle falls, the person has fallen, someone comes to help, right? And naturally, how do you help? You have to lift the bike or the scooter. The bike or scooter is already running. You lift, the handle itself has a throttle. You lift the scooter or the vehicle, and then in the process of failing, you get injured because the vehicle moves, right? Now we are able to introduce a feature called fall safe. It does nothing. The moment it senses the vehicle in inclination going beyond a certain degree of orientation, it automatically cuts up the motor power. Now you can easily lift. So I think that's the power of software which is going to flow into the products, which is like going to add so much value to the consumers year after year using the same vehicle as he mentioned. It's immense. It's immense.
I think we have one more question. Yeah.
So good afternoon, sir. My question is specifically for Mr. Sanjeev. So since you work in Ather, my question is, what are the challenges that you face while procurement of lithium ions, and how do you resolve those challenges?
I think the most burning question for any EV manufacturer. So if you look at it, there are the fundamental challenge there, and why it's a big topic is geopolitically, the entire supply chain is controlled by one particular country, right? So even if the raw material is available somewhere in Africa, the processing happens in China, for example, right? So the current way to solve for that is diversify to the extent possible. Of course, Chinese have kind of monopoly in that, but you have Japanese, you have Koreans who have also got a certain market share there. So how do you have? So currently we leverage the vendors in all these three countries to ensure that we have enough supplies. Second is you look at long-term partnerships in terms of your purchase agreements. The third one, which is the most important, is how do you keep looking for alternate chemistry, right? So if you look at, if you guys have done some research on that, so the lithium-ion battery has multiple chemistries. The one chemistry which is prevalent right now, which is called NMC, has got a lot of rare earth material. So the biggest challenge is not lithium. The biggest challenge is your nickel, manganese, cobalt, which is found very. How do you find alternate chemistry? So four-wheelers already have started to use LFP as a chemistry, which is basically your iron phosphate you use, and iron is abundant available, right? So lithium is going to be there, but you're going to get rid of cobalt, nickel, manganese, all of those rare earth material. So how do you use technology? And of course, there are inherent challenges with that technology. So I think as automotive OEMs, the focus is more on how do we ensure that we move towards the technology being more accessible and sustainable. From a fundamental chemistry perspective, that's the biggest work that's going to happen, or that's actually happening right now. You're talking about sodium-ion batteries, you're talking about LFP batteries. There are multiple chemistries being explored. I think it's a matter of time, another 4-5 years. For us, probably next couple of years itself, I would have migrated from a more, I would say, rare earth uses NMC chemistry to an LFP chemistry.
Okay. So I think we have been able to answer a few questions. If there are more, the panelists, all of us are available in the break, or we could also reach out separately, right, for any specific questions there. Thanks a lot. Hopefully this has been interesting.
Thank you so much to all our panelists. It was such an informative discussion. For me, I could actually see supply chain from 3 different industries, be it retail, automotive, and EV, and how technology has transformed each of these industries. Be it the digital twins, or reducing the retail supply chain to 45 days, or tapping into the visibility of supplier chain network for the automotive industry. Every industry has a story to tell here. Thank you so much again, panelists, for joining us and sharing your insights into the audience and engaging with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone. Thank you.
As we conclude the operations and conclave, I would actually like to invite my peer fellow mates, Prachi and Surya, to please come on the stage and present the panelists with a token of appreciation. Guys, please. I'll stop the panelists for a few photos more. Please come to the front and we'll have a photo with all the panelists. So we'll join in the next. By that time, I would request the faculty members also to come and join on the stage for the photograph.